everyone, and welcome to the Atheist Experience. My name is Russell Glasser. With me today is my guest, Katilyn Pulcher.
Hello.
Today is May 27th, 2018, and this is the Atheist Experience. Now, Katilyn, just before the show, you were asking, is this a normal-sized crowd for the show? And I would say these days it kind of is, but the crowd for the show has been getting bigger and bigger, and I don't know what we did to deserve that, but I'm really glad to see all of you smiling people out in the audience. The Atheist Experience is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, a Texas nonprofit educational organization dedicated to the promotion of separation of church and state and positive atheist culture. Now, normally I would say that we are going to dinner after the show, but today, and apparently several times recently, we are just hanging out right here in the ACA building, which is at 1507 West Koenig. We are going to have snacks. We're going to hang out and talk to each other, and it's going to be a super fun time. So if you're not already here in this gigantic audience, then maybe start making your way over. Also, I would like to mention that Dan Earls, who is a good friend and was with us at the American Atheist Convention last month and hangs out here at the ACA pretty often, he is going to be doing his first speaking gig at the Secular Student Alliance Convention end of June. I do not have the rest of the details on that, but I believe it's right there on your screen. He has a GoFundMe page so that he can afford to get there. And as you can see, many people have already donated. So feel free to support him. And if you are involved with the Secular Student Alliance, why aren't you going to this convention? It's going to be great, I bet.
Yep.
Okay. So, Katilyn, I met you at the American Atheist Convention, and you are an author. And why don't you tell me a little bit about your background and your book?
Sure. So I was raised in a Baptist fundamentalist family, very Bible beaters by the book. And I came out of the Christian community in my mid-20s, I would say, when a relative became alcoholic. And the whole family was praying and praying and praying that this person would get better. And nothing got better. Everything got worse and worse and worse. And so I finally, I watched the movie The Invention of Lying with Ricky Gervais in it.
Yeah, very funny movie.
And I was like, it just made so much sense that someone had made the whole thing up and that no one's up there listening to us. And so I just sort of let it go. And it's been a much more peaceful existence ever since then. So
you were a fundamentalist Christian when you watched The Invention of Lying, and that got the ball rolling?
Well, it was, the relatives decline plus the movie all wrapped up together. And then, at the time of watching the movie, too, I sort of started Googling some of the things that I had been taught in church to see what the Bible actually says about them, because the type of church that we went to, you just show up on Sunday and you trust that everything that they tell you is in the Bible somewhere, but you don't actually go to search it yourself. But now with Google, you can
let's face it, the Bible is not a page turner.
No, it's really not. I think they printed on the thinnest paper possible for that reason, to discourage people actually reading it. But yeah, so then I found out that a lot of these lessons that I had learned weren't even in there to begin with. And so, the more I researched and the more I watched the movie, I was like, this is just made up. This is a bunch of crap, basically.
How long would you say you've considered yourself an atheist now?
Probably 8 years or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on making the transition.
Yeah.
And what possessed you to write a book about it? I
got into a support group as my relative was drinking, and so as I worked through the support group, they sort of demanded belief in a higher power, and that wasn't really working for me because I was an atheist. But I didn't know of any survivors of religious abuse support groups. So we're reading this book in the support group. It's not really helping me, so I thought, I don't see anything else out there that's going to help me. I might as well write my own. And so I started writing my own story in hopes that it reaches other people and inspires them to sort of leave the church, basically, and women in particular. I think women are tired of men telling us what to do. Like, even a lot of them joined religion because a man told them to do that, so they don't want another man telling them now to leave it, do this, do that, think this, think that. And so my book is more like, think for yourself, feel for yourself, and you'll arrive at the right conclusion.
Right. So the book is called Status Quon't. Cute. A woman's perspective on how Christianity was never about God. Do you mean that literally?
I do.
Or, okay.
Yeah.
It was never about God. For like even for believers now, is it partially about God for people, or do you think people are intentionally misleading each other?
I think basically my book is about how I think Christianity began, and I think I think men wanted to control their women, or people who are different from them. Maybe it was straight men wanting to control homosexuals, or vice versa. I don't know. I wasn't there, obviously, but my theory is that, you know, fear is the most motivating force in all humans. If you want to inspire someone to do something, you make them afraid of a consequence. And so I think these men thought, okay, we have to inspire fear in women or homosexuals or children to control them. And so in order to do that, they came up with something even scarier than they are. So like, you can be scared of a man, but you can move away from him, and that extinguishes the threat. Whereas if you come up with this supernatural being that you can never get afraid of, it works like a charm because you can't get away from it. It's always watching you, even when your husband or your father or your mom is gone. And so it just worked as this tool for control. And then it became this sort of gaslighting thing where all these men got in on it, and they corroborated each other's stories and wrote this book and convinced everybody like that was the truth.
Okay. So this is basically sort of a series of speculative essays, basically,
yes.
on how Christianity could have gotten started. When you were in church, did you, what was your sense of the sincerity of belief of people who were actually, I mean, I gotta tell you where I'm coming from. I was raised as a secular Jew, and I never was deep into basically the churchy community.
Okay.
My impression of people who take religion seriously is that they take religion seriously, and they believe what they say they do, although when religion tells them things that they want to hear, they're not exactly fighting to dispute things that they to not hear what they want to hear. Well, you were in church until your mid-20s. Did you feel like nobody really believed in God, or what?
No, I think plenty of people in that community actually do, and I think it's a way for a lot of people to cope with things that we don't have coping skills to deal with. So like, if your very young mother is dying from cancer and you just can't wrap your brain around why that's happening, maybe it makes people feel better to think, oh, she's going beyond and I'll see her someday. So it's just, they don't have the coping skills to deal with it at that young age, and so they lean on religion for that reason, to help them get through it, I think. Yeah.
What about people who come to Christianity when they're older?
It might be the same type of thing, where they're going through something so challenging they need something else to hold on to, and they get into it that way. Or some people are just crazy. Like, I don't know. There's a variety of reasons that people can wind up in the church. I certainly don't think most people who are in the church took it as literally as my family did. I think it was so extreme and so painful for me to go through as a kid that also inspired me writing my own story. Like, I don't want what happened to me to happen to anybody else if I can prevent that. So.
Right. Can you give me an example of the kind of personal story that we'd find in this book?
Sure.
Like something specific that you went through while you were deep in the church stuff.
So, I mean, I went to church at my earliest memories, probably 4 or 5 years old, and I remember being 5 years old and we were told to pray the salvation prayer. And it's explained to me that you're going to die someday, and if you don't pray this prayer, then you're going to be burning in hell underneath all of us for eternity. And like, that's insanely scary for a 5-year-old to believe in. And so that was pretty traumatizing there. And then this is all in chapter 2 of my book. And then I talk about how that sort of led to all these weird tendencies of me like washing my hands and being afraid of public restrooms and stuff like that, because I was afraid to die, because I thought maybe I'll go to hell. So you're a kid, and it's just traumatizing.
As a 5-year-old, did you feel any sense of odds about whether you'd wind up in hell or not? I mean, I feel like the nice story that the church tries to present is, look, God forgives people. You deserve this horrible torture, but you're not going to get it because of Jesus Christ. Yada yada yada. Christians tell me that they find it comforting, and it must be scary as an atheist to have nothing. It sounds like you were, even having been raised in the church your whole life, legitimately scared of winding up in hell yourself.
It created anxiety. It had the reverse effect for me, and I think it has for my family, because at 5 years old, I would not have been thinking about, I'm going to die someday. What happens to me next? There was no context for this discussion. It just came up because it came up in church that Sunday. It's not like we lost a family pet and then I was asking questions. It was all just forced on me. And so I think, as an atheist, if you think nothing happens when you die, that's not terrifying, because being barbecued for all eternity in a fiery inferno is much scarier than I'm going to be in the ground somewhere, at least for me, personally.
Right. So you told me that American Atheist was the first time you've been to an atheist convention. What has your experience been like of church community versus atheist community?
Well, they're very different. So I mean, in the fundamentalist Baptist community, there's no alcohol and there's no fun, really. So the convention was much more fun.
Right.
People were more welcoming, and
do they tell any jokes?
No, not really. It's very serious. It's just much more comfortable, too.
I wasn't missing anything, I gotta say.
Yeah. And you can wear whatever you want to an atheist convention, but at church, you gotta be all buttoned up. It's freezing cold in there. It's Sunday morning. Everybody's tired. It was just much more relaxed at the convention, I would say. More welcoming.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, glad you had a good time. I did too. So you want to get to calls?
Let's do it.
All right. The book is Status Quon't. The author is Katilyn Pulcher. And we're going to get to our first caller, which is Quincy in Dayton, Texas. Quincy.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Pretty good. What's on your mind?
Well, first, I want to say I got a Christian Instagram. You can follow me on it, Quincy Graham 550 at.
Yeah.
I'm here to make up.
What's your question?
All right. Well, I was saying, why do y'all worship the devil and stuff like that? When I'm not trying to be disrespectful.
What?
You heard me?
I did not catch your question.
You asked why we worship the devil.
Oh. Are you a troll caller?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay. See ya. If nothing else, I've got to say I appreciate he answered that question honestly.
There you
because he stopped us from wasting more time. We are going to go to the only other theist on the line, and operators are standing by if you are a theist who means it. And this is Isaiah in Hawaii. What's up?
Hello, yes. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yep.
You're not a troll caller, right, Isaiah?
No, sir. Not at all.
Cool.
Thank you very much for taking my call.
No problem.
So, yeah, what has led me down this path, what I'm going to present, has just been a deep curiosity and fascination with both creation stories, ancient religious creation stories, and ancient scientific creation stories, and just the whole colorful nature of all these different explanatory stories. And in looking through them, finding a lot of commonalities. And what this has developed along with is working on a cosmology based on God. And I'll get to what I mean by God, that has predictive power. It has measurable predictions on what we find as the phenomenon in the universe.
Well, can you? I'm sure you have a lot of build-up, but I'm really interested in these measurable predictions first. Can you give me an example?
Sure. So I got to start first with what I'm calling God, because all of it unfolds from there.
Can you humor me and do the prediction first, and then then circle back to the other stuff?
Sure, absolutely. So one of them would be a constant expansive influence on the universe. Another would be the anatomy and behavior of atoms. And with further detail of the model, to me, it even predicts the structure and order of DNA.
I question your assumption that any of those are predicted in creation myths, but I'm going to go ahead and let you go back to what you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. So, again, going back to before the beginning, as both scientists and religious love to do, so this is a consideration of an infinite singularity, a unified state that is spatially infinite, okay? Throughout ancient religions, I found it described not necessarily as God, but a pre-existent unified substance often described as water. Like for Greeks, it was chaos. It was an undifferentiated unified substance. It wasn't an arising or falling of forms like we use chaos now. For the Egyptians, it was Nun, this watery substance that was pervaded the universe before the gods arose and all that stuff.
Let me interrupt you. I'd like to know what you're trying to support here. Is it some form of Christianity or some kind of vague general, like deism or something?
Well, specifically, I believe it would be categorized as panentheism, where the divine is with.
Okay, so you're not a Christian.
Yeah. So, not technically, no. I found many dovetails in. Yeah, I found many dovetails with what I've researched out in the Christian mythos, and I've even found that, of course, I'm sure as many of your researchers had in previous incarnations of religion.
But let's say you don't believe that the Bible is literally true. You don't believe that the Quran is literally true. You don't tie anything down to a specific mythology. You just find them useful as a framework. Is that what you're saying?
I find similarities and looking at the Bible in researching it as a collection and kind of an amalgamation of previous similar mythos.
Okay.
And
but you do think of the Bible. You do think of the Bible as a bunch of myths, and not necessarily as there was literally a great flood that filled up the entire world, etc.
Correct. I have an explanation for that, but that's.
Okay.
That takes some explaining, which I'm not going to get into. But anyway, looking at all these myths, especially the Bible, as kind of an example of the telephone game where things get changed over time as they get retold and simplified and then changed for people's agendas and things like that. But
do you think that, does that mean that you think that if we had the unadulterated original first edition Bible and we read what it said that hadn't been corrupted by the telephone game, it would have said stuff that was completely accurate?
No, I think the stories that were handed down that got compiled as the Bible were already a result of the telephone game. Like the Council of Nicaea ended abridged what was considered,
But where do you think the stories originally? Where do you think the stories originally came from? Like the telephone game. In the telephone game, somebody is still the first guy to say something.
Yes.
And what do you think?
I think
that is.
Okay, I'll get to that part then. I think what I want to eventually share with you was known by humanity before. I don't think I've discovered anything new as this cosmological logic of how things come to be. That it was known before and got codified.
Known by who?
Stories of gods and ancient man, even civilizations that were prior to this one that we have just the barest remnants of.
So ancient man knew more then than we do now? Is that your point?
Yes, in a way, not in specific, but
what
not like
made you conclude that? When you reviewed the entire history of humanity, what made you come to the decision? And I'm sorry to keep cutting you off, but I'm not sure how long you expect to take to lay out this whole argument, and I'm just interested in your underlying point. How did you decide, looking at the whole history of humanity, that people started out knowing a whole lot of stuff and then gradually forgot things and got dumber and dumber? Is that what you're saying?
Well, for various reasons, for control reasons, and like your other guest said, for installing fear and control in the populace rather than personal knowledge and freedom.
Well, that's not the question. I mean, that is your diagnosis of the situation, but my question is, how did you determine this?
Okay, so...
It sounds like a theory like mine is.
Right.
Maybe.
Well,
is it a theory of yours like mine?
It sounds like a conjecture. I wouldn't call it a theory.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually, my in the scientific sense, my theory is geometrically predictive on the phenomenons in the universe. And what I found in that geometry and how these pieces relate to each other, I've been able to find a subjective story that is echoed and has so many similarities and corroborations throughout not only modern religion but ancient religion. It was just started when I discovered this fundamental pattern. It just was staring at me in the face from all these different ways, like looking through a glass darkly. There's a vague shape there, and it is a reoccurring shape.
Do you have an example of a thing that people used to know and have mostly forgotten? Well,
specifically, but
maybe that's not a fair question, because if people have forgotten it, then you wouldn't know what it is. But
well, things like the Library of Alexandria, containing vast amounts of knowledge that just got wiped out and burned down. There was a great loss.
Yeah, but you don't. I mean, you don't know what was in that. I mean, I don't doubt that there are a lot of things that they forgot about. But I'm wondering, like, I'm as a software engineer, I read a whole lot of technical manuals. I have a lot of background on how computers work and how they were invented, and basic trade knowledge. Katilyn, I'm allowed to say what your job is, just not where you work, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You work as an
analyst,
right? Yep. For stocks, basically, or an analyst for companies. There are very specific, detailed things that you have to learn. I'm not sure where I'm going with this.
I'm not sure where our caller's going. That was my next question. Where are we headed here?
Yeah.
And the show has a limited amount of time, and so maybe you can understand I'm wary to just sit back and let you develop some very abstract argument that's leading to a point that I'm not clear how you arrived at that point in the first place.
Okay. Well, let me just give you the first prediction of this logic of this working model that I believe I've rediscovered. So, again, starting with an undifferentiated substance that's infinite, it has very specific relationships with its own substance. And this is it describes the same motion as the Big Bang, but instead of a finite or infinitesimal singularity, we're dealing with an infinite singularity. So this would be what I would call God. It is omnipresent. It is almighty in that it is absolute pure substance, pure matter. And not to say that it doesn't have a subjective spirit or mind, if you will, but like with the knowledge of anatomy, I could say with any human up to 99% surety how they are organized, but I can't really say anything about their subjective nature unless they introduce themselves to me. So I'm not going to go on the subjective nature of God. Again, the objective nature of...
I got to be honest with you, Michael. That sounded like a whole bunch of word salad to me. I mean...
Okay. Well, let me just get to this one single point of this model. This infinite singularity has specific relationships with itself, and in quantizing an infinite
that already sounds like more word salad. Something has a bunch of relationships with itself. I mean, When you say that you're going to make scientific predictions about something, I mean, a lot of times the scientific predictions take the form of things like, if you do this specific thing, then based on this information, some measurable effect will occur. You quantify it, and then you are able to repeat that example over and over again. Do you have anything like that? Or do you just have it? So I predict that something will have a whole bunch of relationships with itself.
No, it only has 3 spatial relationships with itself.
Okay.
And when this thing unfolds, it unfolds a metaverse in an equal-sized sphere pack, because they're all the same quantized expression or voided expression of the original one thing. Interestingly, a equal-sized sphere pack, each sphere takes up
What the hell is a sphere pack?
74.05.
What do you do with all of this knowledge? Are you using a formula to predict the answers to your questions from us?
Yeah, and also I want to know, like, have you predicted anything? Have you predicted anything that we didn't already know?
Well,
like has your research led to any particular experiments where you were able to say in advance, nobody has ever done this before, but I predict this is going to be the outcome, and then you did the experiment and it happened the way you predicted? Because that's what a prediction is normally.
Right. Well, this again, it's a geometric model that has specific spatial predictions on the not only the expansive constant of our universe. So let me get to the single point real quick.
What experiments did you do on the expansive constant of our universe?
Let's hear the single point. What do we think the point is? Go ahead, Isaiah.
Okay. Well, what I'm finding geometrically is lining up with things science has already found.
Like what?
It gives a like the expansive constant of the universe, dark energy.
So can you give me a number on one of these constants?
Yes. So this is if your listeners will look this one up, it's called the Kepler conjecture. It was done by a number of mathematicians who calculated. It's also called the cannonball problem. How much space equal-sized spheres take up versus the space in between the spheres.
Well,
and this is in relation to a metaverse.
That sounds like a prediction of math, not science. Do you know the difference?
Okay.
I mean...
Yeah. Okay, then it's a mathematical prediction. And what it predicts is an infinite sphere stack. The expansive constant is the same on every single universe.
Okay, and this was predicted where? In the Bible?
No.
Okay,
no.
Where?
In a geometric mathematical model.
Which came from religion somehow.
No.
No?
I'm not arguing from any textbook or anything. This is
I'm lost.
It's a pure geometric model.
Which you developed?
Yes.
Based on what?
Based on a lot of research, based on geometry, based on mathematical measurements. So again, and this is as opposed to the many worlds metaverse theory that based on this infinite unified substance.
You're losing me, man.
The universe has. Okay. Let me get back to one last point, and then I'll sign off. This infinite singularity is around itself equally in all directions, exists as a field throughout itself, and at the center of itself everywhere. And this creates a void space universe by cavitation. If you want to use the word quantum fluctuation from science, that works too. Anyway, it makes a finite spherical space with a field in between it and the central.
I'm sorry.
Point.
I think I've given you enough of a chance.
Yep. Nobody's following.
Okay, well.
See you later. Okay.
We're all a bunch of triangles, and God is water and everything. That's what I got out of
that. I was hoping this would have anything to do with defending religion, but it didn't seem like it. Yeah. Roland in Lithuania.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
I'm not sure if there's a lag, but I hope that's not a problem.
Well, Lithuania is a long way away. There might be.
Yes, okay. Yeah, a bit uncomfortable talking right now. I'm I think first time calling into a show like that. So
it's okay. You can't be worse than the last guy.
Okay, yeah, good point. Thank you. So, yeah, thanks for having me. I want to talk about kind of improving the communication of people in general and atheists specifically. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is essentially, well, we could divide atheists into two groups. So those who are just atheists and don't even care about that, right? They don't have a belief in a deity, but they don't maybe even talk about that. And then the other the other atheists who do care about this and, well, in some way relate to religion, right? They speak about it. They maybe have discussions, maybe debates, and in most cases, I think they also have some other valuable points to make, not just about religion, but about society in general. And I guess most people on your show are, or maybe all people on your show are in that category too.
Well, like, if we didn't want to talk about religion, we wouldn't be on this show.
Yeah. I guess,
but yeah,
I mean, also wanting some kind of social change. Yes. So I have maybe like 12 years of experience being an atheist. Before that, I was just not acknowledging that for myself, not realizing that. And after reading Carl Sagan's Demon Haunted World, I kind of just, okay, well, yeah, I am an atheist. And I just realized that. And later on, I've joined on Facebook a Lithuanian atheist group, and later became one of the admins. And so for all those years, I've been seeing how atheists interact and how they both in the group and, let's say, on YouTube and in other Facebook groups. And I've seen what usually it ends up being with. It's mostly people who are just very disagreeable, who kind of spend the most time, bashing religion and be like,
well, I mean, I gotta say, it depends on the culture of the place that you decide to hang out. Like, for instance,
sure.
I mean, YouTube in particular, people who interact with each other regularly on YouTube, for whatever reason, seem to have a particularly toxic atmosphere.
Anonymous commenting doesn't bring out the best in people, typically.
Yes, that is true.
That also.
And
yes.
I say that at great risk because our biggest base of viewership is here on YouTube. Subscribe today and like the show.
Yes. So, well, I guess my point is that I understand where they're coming from, why it's easy to just mock people who are seeing things differently. And on occasion, I was closer to that position. But over the years, learning more about other things, I've kind of realized that if I really want to have an improvement somewhere in society regarding this, there are better ways. And I want to talk about those ways. And just like, well, I'm sure you're familiar with street epistemology. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe you even had Anthony, what's the last name?
Anthony Magnabosco.
Magnabosco, yeah, him on the show, or at least Matt Dillahunty had him on his talk.
Anthony was also on the Nonprofits a few weeks ago, which,
So this is one approach, right? So rather than debating people, you're just asking them, how do they come to the point of believing a particular thing, right? And it's probably much less likely to provoke people into certain kind of antagonistic positions. And then the dialogue can go further, and it's much less like in debates where you're trying to prove the other side wrong. It's more like just about understanding each other, or at least one side.
So I think there is value to both approaches, and I've talked to Anthony, and he does too. He happens to be the niche that he's found is just politely and cautiously asking questions. But I think there is a place for people being argumentative and pushy. Katilyn, you said that one of your big inciting incidents was watching the movie
Invention of Lying.
Invention of Lying,
Yep.
right? Which is kind of I mean, it's a funny movie and a nice movie, and Ricky Gervais plays a very sweet character, but it is definitely very critical and mocking.
It's a mockery of religion,
Christianity.
Yeah, I think there's different strokes for different folks. Like, we can empathize with your approach that it would work for a certain type of person, but there's so many different types of people in the world, and there's so many different types of atheists as well, that we can all sort of use our own approach to reach different people, I think. So
Sure.
I hear your point, but I think we don't want to make a new religion like this is the only way to communicate with people. That's just a new religion, you know?
I was not implying that. I do understand that, you know, at least if a person is not capable of doing anything else but what they're already doing, I guess they'll just continue doing that. It's more about raising the awareness of other alternatives, other possibilities, and then trying to convince them, let's say even through a kind of a argument and debate, that there is value in those other things besides what they're already doing. And what I would like to stress psychology knowledge as kind of a general background to that, and specifically empathy. And when I say empathy, I need to be specific, because even on Wikipedia, if you go to empathy description, there's like 5 or 6 distinct either aspects or even types of empathy. So the word it got used in many different ways in different contexts. So people mean different things. And for example, if we take Paul Bloom's book Against Empathy, he's also talking about specific things, which I would say probably is closer to what's referred to as sympathy.
Yeah, but I think maybe I can help you make your point a little bit, which is that there are more effective and less effective ways of communicating with people, and I think that what some atheists in various walks of life don't appreciate enough is that you have to be able to, at least to some extent, understand how the other person thinks if you want to be good at changing their mind. And that doesn't mean you have to agree with them, and it doesn't mean that you have to take their position seriously. But you do have to talk about things that they talk about things in a way that they understand, and not just jump in their face and say a bunch of stuff about, like, oh, well, you just want to you just want to lord your religion over other people, and if and that may be true for some people, but if the person that you're talking to at the moment doesn't think that, then he's immediately going to shut down the conversation because you guys are talking past each other, basically. And some of what empathy is trying to understand how the other person's mind works and talk to them on a level that they can appreciate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And well, there's probably a lot of stuff on that topic. In general, I would like to refer to maybe 1 or 2 specific things. I'm wondering if you're familiar with the nonviolent communication as one approach to empathy.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're familiar. Great.
Yeah.
So I think understanding psychology in general already helps, in many ways, because then when you understand people's emotions and all that. But what nonviolent communication contributes is this distinction between needs and the strategies that we use to meet the needs, and the assumption that whatever the people are doing is based on this wanting to meet the needs. So when we see people in this way, we kind of stop being triggered by their ways of expressing themselves, because we stop listening to the words and focus on their intentions much more. And I think that can resolve most of the conflict internally for us, because we are no longer viewing others as, wrong or even, manipulative and deceptive and all that. We just see, okay, they're trying to reach something, and then we just focus on that. And then it's no longer even as important, or what are they meaning, and why are they saying those specific things in terms of reasoning, like what are their reasons to make that specific argument. Well, maybe I'm not putting it right. I mean, I'm talking about the rationale.
I think there's a lot of validity to what you're saying. Although one of the things I would caution is that it is possible that some people actually have bad intentions, and I think it's a good idea to approach a conversation as if the person is sincere and
no, I'm not saying that
not out to get you.
But sorry, maybe I was not clear with that, and sorry for interrupting you. They could be manipulative in a sense, but if I see that, okay, this is a manipulation that I need to dodge or something like that, then I'm still seeing them as an enemy, and that might make it harder for me. Rather than I would just say, okay, well, they're trying to get something. I don't need to get involved into that, but I can still explore their intentions and keep asking about intentions rather than focus on the topic that they want to talk about. So figuring out why do they want to talk about this in the first place, and why is it important to them?
Yep. Well, it takes all kinds of conversations.
Yep.
You got anything to add?
No, I guess I would say too, like sometimes shock value does work. Because like think of, so like when I was a kid, we were with my family all the time. My parents didn't really have friends. We never saw my aunts and uncles or anything. So I think if I had an aunt, I have an aunt who's an atheist, and if she had been around and just screamed in my parents' face and called the stuff bullshit, like if I saw that as a kid, that would have been very impactful. So there are these situations where like the shock value of being like, hey, snap out of it, like it does work. But to your point, I think we all agree with your point. Everybody wants people to communicate with them in an empathic manner, regardless of whether they're talking about religion or anything in particular. So
right.
I think we're on board with you.
And I also just wanted to make the point that there are, for real, dishonest, like sadistic people out in the world.
Sure.
And you don't always have a choice to just not interact with them at all. And so every situation is different, and sometimes you have to assess the situation still with an understanding of how that person really thinks and what motivates them. But sometimes just chatting with them politely isn't enough to advance your position. So it really depends.
Well, I wouldn't say that NVC is about politeness. It's about much more about honesty, in fact.
Yeah.
So, I wasn't expecting the conversation to go this way exactly. So I'm just thinking what I want to add here is I think there's a big potential in terms of social change if many more atheists would figure out this part, because then we would save a lot of time, which I think is oftentimes wasted for those fruitless conversations or debates or arguing, both on YouTube comments and Facebook groups, which is, one example would be, a lot of easy ways to trigger atheists into some kind of, spending a lot of time to make arguments in Facebook groups. Like you just post one thing and then 100 atheists answer, and then the original poster doesn't even make a new comment, and it seems like
Roland,
very easy
you've made some good points, and I appreciate your call, and I think we need to move on to other callers now. So thanks for calling.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, Michael in California.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, hi. My name is Michael. I'm calling from California. How are you guys doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, great. I got to know your show through my ex-wife.
Mm-hmm.
She is an atheist. I'm a believer. I was born and I was raised Orthodox Christian. I was not born in this country. I was born in a different country back in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry, my English is not as good as you, is not as any of the other callers. So, I'm just trying to be
I can understand.
We
you,
understand
so don't
you.
worry.
And great. And if I'm not clear for any reason, like you can tell me and I can repeat this. The discussion, I go in discussion with my ex-wife about atheism or the Bible most of the time. She listened to your show too a lot. What I wanted to know, because when I listen to your show, I find myself going in a circle. I understand that it's a great option, and chance that the people can call and you give them the option to, talk about Christianity while you guys are atheists. But what I want to know is that is the discussion, the main discussion, is there is God or no God?
Okay.
If there is God, if there is God, then we can move over and talk which God is it? Is the God of the Christians or Muslims or Jewish? And if there is no God, then no need to talk about how cruel is the God of the Bible. Some callers, like yesterday, I was listening to the show, I think an old episode, they would try to explain about, you guys talking about the slavery. No, there is explanation for everything. Those people are weak, and I hope as many people listening to me as possible. Like I said, I am not from here. Mm-hmm. I was not born here. People here, 90% of them, of the callers, are Protestant. Whatever the denomination is.
Sorry,
Protestant.
what? Oh, Protestant,
Yep.
yes.
Protestant, yeah. Whatever denomination, Adventist or whatever else. Those people, this religion is 500 years old. Jesus was 2,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. So somebody who's 500 years ago is already, they do not have enough knowledge to be discussing the Bible. Even if you find 10% or 20% who are Catholic, it's the same thing. People in the United States...
Hang on, I got to disagree here because I don't think that the age of a thing necessarily has any relationship to how well informed it is. I mean, a lot of the scientific information that we have is much, much less than 500 years old, but I think that it is much more accurate than anything that was handed down for 2,000 years. I mean, you may not agree with all science, and I'm going to bet you don't.
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. I wasn't clear in this. When I said the age of 2,000 years ago, mean that this religion is 500 years old.
Okay.
And came out from another religion that was Catholic, and it is 1,300 years old. Both of them against each other. Both of the two religions based in or based on many political things. So none of them is correct.
For the sake of argument, though, for the sake of argument, I'm going to ask, what if it turned out that Catholicism was wrong and Protestantism was just a correction to the mistakes that they had made? Would that be possible?
Yeah, no, not possible. I tell you why it is not possible. I tell you why, and everything I will say, I'll give explanation. Why it is not possible. When you go for the history of the United States, you can track the history back to the first person who came here. And this is the history of the United States.
Well, the first person who came here wasn't really part of the history of of the United States as a nation.
No,
but
I'm talking about when you, that's what I was going to tell you now. When you talk about the Constitution of the United States, and when you go for a loose suit.
Hello? Oh, we lost him. Not that we were following you in the first place.
We're having some bad luck with Christian callers today, I'm afraid. Do you want to say anything about his point?
I have no idea where he was going, to be honest with you.
I mean... The proper magic sphere collar from
sphere
from a
geometrical
while ago.
formula for predicting whatever.
You know, he was spending a whole lot of time apparently digging through all these old creation texts and trying to mine the fundamental core of insightful information that the ancient people have that we don't have now. And it seems like this is, in general, a way that Christians approach knowledge. It's the idea.
The
Then
oldest
that'll
one.
be it.
That's the theory. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And I think that the secular approach to knowledge is different, which is we are people who happen to have found ourselves in some enormously complicated universe that has been running for several billion years, and nobody has really had the level of intelligence until recently to even start to get their minds around it. Nobody has begun, like, the universe existed, but nobody has perceived anything or tried to impose some kind of meaning over it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of stuff that we don't know. And the way that people scientifically have learned to approach information is to assume that mostly the things that we don't know are discoverable, but they're things that we don't know yet. And so we start little by little to basically expand our level of knowledge by looking into things and saying, oh, I think it works this way. Well, it turns out it almost works that way, but the experiment says that it doesn't quite. So let's alter the information that we thought we knew, and then future generations who read this book can know, like we tried this theory, it didn't make sense. So don't waste your time making that same mistake, because actually the truth is a little bit different. And so under this model, we converge on understanding the universe over time, whereas under the theist model, apparently there's just one actual absolute source out there somewhere in the mists of time, and if we could only tap into it, then we'd know everything. And I don't think that's true.
I don't think so either. I think my general thought is, like, since Christianity is what harmed me, my book focuses on get away from that. Like, I don't offer up new answers. Status Quon't is not about this way is wrong, follow my way. My thing is, that one's absolutely wrong. Whatever the Christian belief is, there's no way in hell that happened. And I don't know what did happen, but I know it's not that. Like, and I think that's enough for me, and I hope that's enough for some other people too. I think the jump from creationism to we all came from apes is a big leap for some people, but if you can get away from creationism and get halfway there, then the world is a better place, I think, because a lot of laws that we have in our country right now, and a lot of our leaders who are running our government believe everything that's in that big stupid book that's been passed down forever. Yeah.
Right, and that actually does tie back into the call screener note for that last caller did say he was going to ask, why do atheists spend so much time talking about the Bible?
Because it's corrupting our entire nation. It's built into our laws in this country.
Yeah, it's not that the Bible is that interesting. It's just that people who believe in the Bible are everywhere and are trying to push some kind of weird biblical misinformation. So we're talking about the people and not, whoa, all the lines just went dark. And so did my list of callers. We have lost every caller, and also I don't even know if there's normally a dial tone.
Oh, all right. Okay.
The internet is down. That also means we're not broadcasting.
Okay.
But we are still recording.
Okay.
So, most people watch this show later. Is the internet going to come back? Okay. So this book.
Yeah.
You lucked out today, Katilyn.
We're looking at it. We'll hold it up so people can see it
Right.
here. We're just looking at the table.
Tell me a little bit more about this book.
So it's obviously I'm a woman, and it's a woman's perspective is in the title of it. So I tie a lot of problems in our society today back to biblical issues as well. So there's a chapter called The Original Dress Code, and it's I tie it back to the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve, and it's like she
that it was perfectly cool for Adam and Eve to go walking around naked as long as they didn't feel any shame about it. But as soon as they started feeling shame, then they had to cover up. So, I was never really clear on how that story. I mean, apparently, the ideal state is for everybody to go ahead and be a nudist but not feel bad. But that doesn't seem very consistent with the way that
I don't know that we'd get there in
Christianity,
this kind of world we're in today, but. But yeah, so I talk about that, and then there's a chapter about social media and about, I sort of tie it to like the public as God, kind of like you have to answer to each other now on the internet. You used to be able to keep all your stuff under wraps and then confess it to a priest, but with the Me Too movement and everything else, your confessions are out there before you even get to say them these days. It's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, that's true, and I'm not sure that I would say that that it means that
it doesn't mean like
people
the
are
public
God.
is God, but yeah, it's arguing from a
in a way
faith-based
that
standpoint.
Social media and religion fulfill the same desire, which is to have somebody pay attention to you.
Yeah.
In a way.
Self-importance. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't think that. I mean. So I'm not sure what the original intention of people creating religion really was, because I can't go back and read their mind. But I think that people live and die, and more people come through and run into systems that are already in place. I mean, at this point, Christianity has been around for 2,000 years. And it would be hard to say that you could blame any particular person who said, oh, I know, I'm going to create a religion on purpose so that I can control women, specifically. But
it is sort of fundamentally believed that no woman had any part in writing the Bible. So you could say, regardless of the number of men. Yeah.
Is it? I'm not really aware of that.
I believe that to be the case. Well, given how shaming and terrible it is to women, how sexist it is, it's hard to believe a woman would have written the Bible.
Yeah, but my understanding is that a lot of the Bible was originally passed down as folklore, and it was committed to paper over time, and I've read some books on the historical origins of the Bible, and some of it is even people who spend a lot of their time have not really nailed down specific people or genders who wrote the book. It's just they refer to them as by like single letters, like, okay, well this part of the book comes from R and this part of the book comes from J. Have you seen any of those books?
I have not. But I'm just thinking of, think of the verses that are, let's say, like, women can't speak in church and women have to defer to their husbands to make their decisions. It's just impossible for me to fathom a woman writing, I can't talk in church.
Right.
I have to ask him what I can do for myself.
Definitely definitely the apostles in the story were all male. And a lot of the New Testament was written by St. Paul, who specifically was pretty damn misogynistic.
Yeah. Yep. I also talk about that in my book too. Like all these people, they believed in the Old Testament. Then there was a New Testament that completely changed the rules. So these people are literally trusting this being that already changed the rules on them. So what if he changes the rules again? Like there's no law that says there can't be a third testament someday that overwrites everything in the first two. Like it's a dangerous game to play, to believe in something that could change by the time you die or even tomorrow.
Although in the Christian mind, none of these changes actually happen because they don't focus on the context, or they think that, or they're aware that there are 30,000 offshoots of Christianity, but I have never met a religious person who didn't think that they just happened to have the exact right one.
Right, yeah.
So apparently, our diligent crew, knowing that the internet may not come back for a while, has gone out and collected audience questions. So we are going to do that for a bit.
All right, we've got you, Russell. Here's our first person, Phil, from Philadelphia.
Can they hear you right now, Eric? Okay.
Hello. I just had the question of what would you expect the impact of the creation of a human quality AI on the state of theism and belief?
Ooh. That's really interesting. As a matter of fact, another person I ran into at American Atheists was David Tamayo, who, like me, is a software guy, and he recommended a book to me which was called Life 3.0, and I've been listening to it on audiobook. And the book is not so much a prediction of the future, but sort of a collection of various ideas that people have about AI and the ideas and the things that may or may not come out of it in the future. He talks to a lot of science fiction authors, and he also tackles some genuinely complicated moral questions that only come up based on the idea that there could be non-human intelligence, and also that the non-human intelligence could do weird things like replicate itself in the cloud. Like, for instance, one of my favorite weird questions that he asked is, suppose that an AI gains enough intelligence that it has its own desires. Should it be allowed to vote in a United States election? Okay, let's say that your answer is yes. Now, suppose that the AI is also capable of making 30 trillion copies of itself so that it always wins the election. Can we limit the amount of votes that the AI gets, or does each copy get a vote?
Yeah.
That is not an answer to your question, but but the questions of of how we will cope with artificial intelligence when it shows up are really complicated and unknown. And I think religious people who think they have all the answers about everything will probably do what they've always done, which is that one generation will completely deny and dehumanize the artificial intelligence, and then eventually the artificial intelligence may or may not successfully fight for their rights to be recognized, and someday in the far future, Christians will say, oh, our religion always included artificial intelligence. What are you talking about? There's not any controversy. God knows everything.
Yeah, and I think it's similar to, their beliefs about doctors in the operating room. It wasn't the surgeon that saved a life. It was God via the surgeon. So if we create artificial intelligence, they'll just say God created the robot or whatever it is.
That's right.
I'm sure. It would be cool if it had an impact on theists, but
yeah, because the human inventors never get any credit.
Right.
So I hope that answers your question a little more. That book is Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark, if anyone's interested. And I've been having a really interesting email exchange with David Tamayo about it recently. Do we have more questions?
We do. Our next question is from Caleb from Dallas. Here's Caleb.
Hello, Caleb.
Hi,
from
Caleb.
Dallas.
Hello, biblical name. This is for Katilyn. I was wondering what was the worst thing your family or religion may have told you, and or what would you like to have seen changed immediately if you had that power tomorrow, your family to not think of or believe immediately?
I think the story I told you guys about being told that I would go to hell and burn for all eternity at 5 years of age was the most scarring thing that happened to me. And I wish, I guess this, if I could go back in time and have my parents change their approach and all parents change their approach, it would be to just fundamentally understand the age at which a child develops doubt. Like, it was not 5 years old for me. You know, if I believe in Santa Claus or I believe there's a monster under the bed, I'm going to believe whatever you say. So if you tell me I'm going to burn up forever, like, I believe that. And I think parents, there's not necessarily a healthy appreciation for the lack of doubt in children, in very young children.
Yeah, well, maybe parents actually, I mean, even if you told them that, they wouldn't care because they really do believe that there is a place you go where you get tortured for eternity if you do the wrong thing, and they're scared that their child is going to fail to believe the things that will get them to the good place.
Yeah. I mean, there's that too, but I guess that's what I was going for in my book. And I know one of my friends, she read it and she told her parents she's not raising her child in a church because of my book. So if more of that happens, I'll be a happy person.
That is definitely progress. She's still a Christian though, right?
No, she's not.
Oh, okay.
Nope.
Well, good. She's an atheist and stands up for herself because of you. Congratulations.
All right. Our next question comes from Jessica, who is here from Switzerland.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Hi.
Hi.
My question will be also to you, Katilyn, and it follows up perfectly. So I wanted to ask if you have any people from your previous social circle that also left church prior to you or after you made that decision?
You know, I moved geographically away from where I went to church. I went to church in Kansas. I grew up in Kansas City and then moved to Chicago. So everybody I knew in the church circle is actually back home still. But I will say it has been painful. I've had to sort of distance myself from some family members who are so focused on it that they literally can't talk about anything else when they see me. And that's not fun for anyone. So yeah, I would say I have not kept ties with most of those people. I probably should for the purposes of spreading atheism, but yeah, it can be a challenge, I think. Yeah. What about you? Were you? I guess you weren't really religious.
Well, no, I wasn't, and so I haven't had a hard time staying in touch with people who have been my friends because they've mostly been atheists.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's actually a challenge to actually meet people or be on good terms with people who are deeply entrenched in religion. I have a few people I consider good friends who are devoutly religious. I've got a friend named Danner who is a Christian, and we used to argue a lot on a message board, but also I think he's a really cool guy, and he's running for some seat in Alabama right now. And I won't tell anybody to look him up or vote for him because we are a nonprofit organization. But I also, a few years ago, tried an experiment where I found a pastor of a local Baptist church. His name's Kyle Miller, and we had him on. And if anything, people were disappointed in that episode because he was way nicer than our average caller. And so we didn't fight enough. But we have remained friends, and as a matter of fact, just last week, it occurred to me out of the blue, hey, I haven't seen Kyle in a while, and we met for breakfast one morning before work and just talked through things, and I talked about some things that had me anxious about atheist communities, and he said, oh yeah, it's just like church, which I don't always take as a compliment.
Agree, but yeah.
but they're all social organizations, and social organizations have things in common.
I will say, though, one thing that's been miraculous for me is that I mentioned my parents a lot in the book, and obviously it's not very kind to them, but they've both read it cover to cover, and they fully supported it, and we still have a good relationship in spite of me telling my story and breaking away from that family system of belief. So to me, hopefully I can be an example of, even if it's scary, like you can maintain those ties with people who remain theists, even as you break away. And I think you know, there's a point too where you can't reach someone if their ears aren't open. So if you can't speak to them, I can always send you my book, and then you're ready to read it someday, you know.
Yeah, but I think it is a good idea in general. Like, it is a lot of effort to maintain friendships with people who aren't on the same page with you about a lot of things. But it is often worth the effort, because if you know a lot of people with a lot of different backgrounds, and you're wondering, you know, hey, I wonder how the Baptist community is feeling about politics these days. I mean, I have someone I can ask, and I may not wind up agreeing with him, but just getting that insight from people outside of your experience is always valuable. Speaking of which, I mean, I kind of want to hang on to our caller from Switzerland, because, you know, one of the best things about the Atheist experience is getting such an international audience, and we happen to have an international audience just sitting here. What was your name again? Wait, can you...
My name was Jessica.
Hi, Jessica.
Hi, Jessica.
What brought you all the way to Texas?
So it was more my boyfriend. He was listening to the show since a long time.
Okay.
So
is he here too?
Yes.
I can't see very well. There's bright lights in my face. But hi guys.
Hi. I'm Lucas.
Hi.
Yeah. So I've heard a lot from like our European listeners that religion is not nearly as pervasive in Europe, and is that your experience too?
Yeah, it is. I was kind of shocked when we drove through the countryside and saw all the billboards and signs for churches and how Jesus is the only way to God and stuff.
Yeah, it takes some getting used to, huh? Well, I'm actually kind of wondering, since religion isn't as pervasive in Swiss culture, what drew you to the atheist experience then?
Really sure. I just stumbled across it on YouTube, I think.
Okay, just fun to watch people argue with a point of view that you never hear there?
I studied biology. I have a master's in evolution. And so I was just curious about the whole discussion that you have here in the States about the school system and how it's fighting you to have evolution taught at all. And
yeah, I guess their creationism doesn't have a lot of traction where you're from, huh?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
Thankfully.
Well, thanks for coming, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your stay. Eric, I just want to say how awesome you are for managing to keep us in calls.
Keeping us alive.
And keeping the energy up out there.
You're making me blush.
Yeah.
All right. Well, actually, your
Who's
your next question is from Chris, and he's here from Baton Rouge.
Okay. Louisiana?
Yes, sir. I was curious about wanting y'all's opinion on why religions seem so much to tout their moderates. Like, aren't moderates just unbelievers versus extremists being, you know, hey, we read it and we believe it as it is, which is what, you know, all the believers seem to want to say.
That microphone's getting quiet, but I think that was the
I'm sorry, I probably wasn't speaking into it well.
Okay. Well, you didn't come from a moderate
No, I
background,
came from
so
extremists, which tends to be the breeding ground for an outspoken atheist as well. You know, you go through the fire, you want to prevent it happening to other people. So yeah.
So in your experience, they probably didn't promote moderates very much.
No, not in the least.
Well, I know that some religious people promote moderates, and certainly the moderates promote themselves, but I mean, I guess a question would be, who specifically do you have in mind? Is it that when you see a religious person on a talk show, they seem more likely to be a moderate, or what?
I mean, here in the United States, it's people saying, you know, okay, the moderates, when it's Christians, they want to point to KKK. But nowadays, I would suppose it's mostly about Muslims, you know, saying, yes, there's umpteen million Muslims, but, the vast majority is moderate. And it's like, well, yeah, moderate to you, who have this really strict view, but, I mean, to me, who doesn't believe in it at all, you know.
Yeah.
Even a moderate is extreme.
Well, it really depends, because I think the kind of person who would say that would be someone who themselves do not think of themselves as a religious extremist. So maybe part of the answer is that fundamentalists, despite what it sounds like if you just go through best of clips on the atheist experience, fundamentalists are not really a majority of the people in the United States. Or they're like Fred Phelps, where, well, okay, bad example, because Fred Phelps is very
most
self-promotional.
extreme you can come up with. Yeah.
And dead, but ding dong.
I think moderates are, it's just a really weak argument that religion isn't all that harmful. And I think the reverse argument to that is, if you're picking and choosing your ethics or your moral lessons from these books, why do you need the book at all? You would arrive at the same place. You can meet an atheist friend who won't steal from you or kick your cat or steal your car without a verse in the Bible telling them not to.
I mean, I agree with you, but I also think that religion fills a niche for some people. And I think there are a lot of ways in which moderate Christians and moderate Muslims are maybe somewhat hypocritical, in that they're claiming to follow a certain, a certain book, but then they pick and choose which parts of it they think actually matter. But that said, people like a lot of things about religion. They like the comfort and certainty that comes from believing that this one original, really old source knew everything, and that you're tapped into the secret knowledge.
Yep.
There is the sense of community that some people get from going to church and spending time around a lot of like-minded people. And let's face it, fundamentalists are assholes. A lot of fundamentalists are really unpleasant people and not pleasant to hang around. Back me up here.
No, absolutely. They're no fun. They're mean, judgmental. Yeah. But I think...
And so people who are just looking for social validation probably won't find it in a fundamentalist church. And so not only will they gravitate toward the more moderate churches, but they will also fight the cognitive dissonance that says that the truer, more sincere religion is the fundamentalism that they've already rejected.
Yeah, and I've met moderates who are more extreme than they think they are, too. You know, I'm moderate because I don't believe in killing people, but I'm sexist as hell, but I'm a moderate. You know, you can't define moderate either, so.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I'd like to think that over time people would abandon fundamentalism, and unless I'm expecting them to go to become all atheists, having a rise of moderation would be a good thing, because it would be a less bad thing.
True, yeah. And I think there's a step too. I think the first step is a-religious, and atheistic could be even beyond that, because some people can leave the Christian church and they don't believe in the Christian God, but they might think there's something else out there. They don't really know, but believing that there's nothing else out there and there never was anything, people have trouble with that too. I think sometimes there's multiple hurdles for people to get through.
Yeah. I'm all for outspoken atheists, but I also think that if more people would just go from taking religion really seriously to not caring that much about religion, that would be a win.
Yeah.
What's next?
Our next question actually comes from our own backyard.
Okay.
On this Memorial Day weekend, we do have a vet who has a question. His name is Benjamin, and he's from Round Rock.
Hello, Benjamin.
Hello.
Hi, nice to meet you guys. My question is kind of for both of you. What advice do you have for atheists across the country, given the current political environment, and specifically with kind of the co-opting idea and the narrative of this war on Christianity and war on religion more broadly?
Yes. There are things about the current political environment that I do not say just because we're a nonprofit, and I don't always know exactly where the line is, but I have lots of opinions about the war on Christianity. Bullshit. Well, not completely bullshit, because, I mean, in a way, I am engaged in making people uncomfortable with with continuing to take their religious beliefs seriously. And is that a threat to fundamentalists? Yeah, it probably is. And furthermore, I think we are winning. I mean, it's not that that atheists outnumber theists, but just that the trend, if you look at the last couple of decades, has just gone steadily upward to the point where if you survey the younger generation, they are way, way less inclined to be religious than the older generation. And I think that's a good thing, and a lot of Christians think it's absolutely terrifying and represents our descent into depravity. But frankly, they still have an iron grip on most of the levers of government, and so I don't feel very sorry for them at all, that they're losing their free advantages.
I like the argument that David Silverman posed in his Fighting God book, and he was talking about it's not a war on Christianity, it's a loss of privilege. And so if you've had a privilege and you lose it, then equality is going to feel like a war to you, but really you're just coming down to the trenches with the rest of us. Because Christianity is definitely given a privilege in this country in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, we don't have the same, Christians don't have the same advantages in Switzerland, I'm guessing. Our audience members from there could concur on that, but yeah.
Right. I'm just going to say, if there's anyone who it would be ironic for to hear talking about a sudden loss of privilege, never mind. Let's move on. Who's next?
Our next question is from Joseph, and he is from Minnesota.
Hi, Joseph.
Hello.
Hello.
So I remember watching a YouTube video, I think it might have been Richard Dawkins, but one of the more vocal atheists from back in the day, and he was talking about militant atheism, and he was talking about like atheism being more active. I was wondering what your thoughts on the term militant atheism, because I can think how people might misinterpret that and maybe be a little bit more radical in how they approach talking with theists. And stuff like that.
I don't use the term militant atheist, and I'm not crazy about it.
I doubt anybody would self-identify as a militant anything, let alone atheist.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes they talk about militant atheism ironically, as in, you know, I have seen the meme that's like, oh, when Christians are militant, they or when Muslims are militant, they fly planes into buildings, and when atheists are militant, they say mean things on the internet. I'm not sure if I would be so cavalier in dismissing the ability of angry, hostile people for any particular cause to get dangerous. But I think that on the whole, atheists aren't particularly militant, and they tend to be in the minority, and they're often unfairly perceived as angrier than they actually are. Although there are plenty of reasons for atheists to be angry about the way that things are.
Yep.
How's that for answering from all sides? Go on.
Testing. That's all of our questions.
Oh, okay. Well, that means we need to vamp for a while longer.
All right.
Let's talk a little bit more about social media.
Okay.
Because it happens to be a topic that I'm very interested in as a computer guy and a politics guy. At what point in your life did the internet become kind of a big thing that was in everybody's lives?
I think I was in high school, and we all started using AOL Instant Messenger. So you'd put up your little away message with a bunch of smiley faces.
Yeah.
Studying for my math test.
Yeah, I've always been in kind of an interesting position because I was a technology enthusiast, and in college, the internet really, like toward the end of my college career, I had always been really interested in computers and the internet, and so this shift happened around my senior year where like even theater students were giving their email addresses to each other. And now everybody takes the internet for granted, which is an incredibly fast takeover of a particular technology. And I think it's great in some ways because I think that connecting people throughout the world has expanded people's access to knowledge. But I think it's weird in other ways because the number of people that you could reach is so vast that whatever ridiculous, nonsensical idea that you have about expanding spheres or whatever.
You can find someone who agrees with you.
Yeah, you can find somebody on the internet who thinks that that's the greatest idea they've ever heard, and they've already written like a dissertation on it. And then you can find this whole community of people who will reinforce bad ideas.
Yeah, but I think, at least in my life, it's had more of a positive change than a negative change. I talk about this in my book, too, about how like if you're involved in a very religious community and nobody knows that you're an atheist and you're doubting everything, finding those people online is enough for some people for a while until they can physically be out in the world or like converse with their friends about it. Like for me, I joined Atheist Republic on Facebook and I was like, oh, there's 2 million other people who think like I do, even though nobody in my immediate circle thinks like that. And it was just this solidarity that sort of gives you courage to be who you are. You know, so I think it's an enormous agent for social change.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought that specifically with respect to religion, that the internet is the arch enemy of religion.
Oh, absolutely.
Because religion, I think, in a community like yours, where everybody had the same belief and reinforced that belief to their kids and to each other in church, that kind of structure sort of relies on hiding away the opinions of the rest of the world, about not even letting kids know that there are alternative opinions out there.
And you could, absolutely, and you could filter the parts of the stories you told them. I talk about this in the book as well, like the story of Noah and the Ark. I learned that when I was like 6 or 7 years old, and all I remember is this coloring book and this beautiful story about a man building a big ship and all these animals walking into it 2 by 2.
And not so much the babies drowning to death.
Fast forward to when I'm 25 and Googling this, and I see he's supposedly 600 years old, and God says, I'm going to kill everybody else on Earth except for this family. I'm like, if they had told that to me as a kid, that alone would have been, you know, but you can't filter what people learn these days anymore.
Yeah.
Everything's searchable. It's great.
Right. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think so.
And at the same time, like a lot of studies have come out recently, which have shown that, like there was a study recently that analyzed all the stories that went viral last year, and they found that there was a particular way in which objectively false stories spread like significantly faster than true stories. So it's complicated. It gives people a lot of access to conflicting information. It doesn't necessarily do the job of filtering out what's right, and you don't get to call yourself a skeptic just because you're good at looking things up on the internet. That's my rant for today, and we've run out the clock.
Great.
Even without callers for half an hour. High five.
Awesome.
Russell, wait, we have one more question.
Oh, we have
one more question coming in.
Okay.
Hello, Russell.
Hello. How
Will we meet again?
Wait, is this the real Hamish or somebody doing a great impersonation?
Oh, it was recording.